The first round is now complete of the 2022 NHL Draft. We're now going to recap and take a look at all 32 of the first round selections, and that's coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, the first round is now completed for the 2022 NHL Draft. We now have 32 selections that have been made. Was it Wright that went to the Habs first overall? Was it Slafkovsky? Were there trades in the first few picks? Let's dive in and recap everything that's transpired here, starting with the first overall selection. Selecting first overall, the Montreal Canadiens surprised us a bit and took Juraj Slafkovsky of Slovakia. The big, strong power forward ended up being the number one overall selection. Of course, Wright by many was considered the consensus pick at first overall for quite some time. But he's a very impressive young man. Like I said, the first Slovakian player to ever go first overall. Big, strong power forward who looks to be NHL ready. We'll see what they decide to do for his development. But the Habs pulled off a bit of a surprise here at number one. At number two overall, we have the New Jersey Devils, who kept the pick and not traded. And they take another Slovakian defenseman, Simon Nemec, who ended up being another big surprise pick here. He was projected to be pretty high. A lot of people had him anywhere from 4, 5, 6 range. Arguably the best defenseman in this draft. The Devils are certainly weaker on the back end after accumulating a lot of solid forward prospects. So Nemec is the pick here. They go make some history for Slovakians going 1-2 in the draft for the first time ever. Selecting third overall, we have the Arizona Coyotes, and they choose to pick American-born forward Logan Cooley. So the projected number one pick, Wright, still on the board. It does not get picked with the first three selections. Of course, Logan Cooley from the Pittsburgh area, a player that's very exciting, dynamic offensive player. Is going to play college hockey for at least one season before he makes the jump to the NHL. Coyotes really want to add an exciting young forward to kind of help sell some tickets here while they go through their new arena process to hopefully get built in Tempe, which is obviously still a question mark and still in the process of being worked on. But Logan Cooley, terrific offensively gifted forward for the Arizona Coyotes at number three. Selecting fourth overall, we have the Seattle Kraken, and they finally select Wright, who was projected to go 1, ends up going 4, but to me, he's in a pretty good situation there with the Kraken. Imagine having Wright and Matty Beniers as your top two centers for the next decade in Seattle. That's a tremendous young talent pool of centers to have to build around. This Kraken team we know wants to be better. Certainly needs to continue building through the draft as well as other methods here. But Wright will give them that solid, dynamic number two center who has Patrice Bergeron qualities. Not going to say he's going to be as good as Bergeron. That's some pretty big shoes to fill. But Wright certainly will be a huge part of the Seattle Kraken's future. And they made themselves a good choice after having this player kind of fall in their lap. Selecting fifth overall, we have the Philadelphia Flyers. Another rumored trade pick, but it's not a case. They keep the pick and select Cutter Gauthier from the U.S. National Team Development Program. Of course, a big, strong forward who is developing as a center, which is what he's expected to hopefully be when he reaches the NHL. He will be going to college hockey for at least 1, maybe 2 seasons. Hard to say exactly how long he stays at Boston College, but certainly Gauthier has a ton of upside, a ton of potential. To be honest, I think he really is a great, flyer. If you think about what they're trying to become, a young, fast team that's tough to play against. Not so much like the Broad Street Bullies from the old days, but a newer, updated version of that. He can certainly fill that kind of description and certainly help them with that. At number 6, we have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and they take defenseman David Jiricek, who's arguably one of the top D here, along with Simon Nemec. No big surprise here to me. This is a great pick for the Jackets. Obviously suffered a pretty significant knee injury earlier this year at the World Juniors, but he is all recovered and healed and ready to go. Right shot defenseman. I think Nemec will probably make it to the NHL a little bit faster than Jiricek, but Jiricek has, from the Czech Republic, has a great opportunity here to be a top 4 right shot defenseman, something the Jackets really need after accumulating a bunch of young talented forwards here in the last couple of drafts. Selecting at number 7, we have the Chicago Blackhawks after acquiring this pick earlier from the Ottawa Senators, and they take defenseman Kevin Korchinski from the WHL Seattle Thunderbirds. Obviously, Korchinski's got good size, good offensive instincts, defends pretty well for his age as well. Racked up a ton of assists in Seattle last year. Of course, this pick was acquired from Ottawa in the Alex DeBrincat trade that went down just a few hours leading into the first round of the 2022 NHL Draft. So Korchinski, you could say a little bit of a surprise pick given what else is on the board here. He was expected to be in the first round, definitely in probably the upper half of the first round, but I certainly didn't have him quite this high, but he does look to be a pretty solid defenseman here for Chicago. At number 8, we have the Detroit Red Wings, and they take Austrian-born forward Marco Kasper. Now, Kasper's a player we had going to Detroit in some of our recent mock drafts. A player who I thought fit the bill for what Steve Yzerman would be looking for here. A really solid player. He may only be a middle six player, not expected to be a top-line player. If he ever develops into that, it'd be more of a bonus for Detroit, but there's lots to like about this player. May not wow you a lot sometimes, but does a lot of little things well, and should be a solid two-way forward for Detroit to mix in well with the prospect pool they're building. Next up at number 9, we have the Buffalo Sabres, and they will be selecting Matthew Savoie from the Winnipeg Ice of the WHL, a young dynamic centerman, small in stature but extremely gifted, very dynamic, will be a great fit in Buffalo. Certainly they've already acquired a lot of young solid D, so I fully suspect that they would try to get their hands on a young dynamic forward here, preferably a center iceman, which Savoie fits the bill. Get to play in the WHL a bit as a 15-year-old on exception. Be interesting to see here how he fits in. Probably going to need some time before he makes it to the NHL, though. At the 10th overall selection, the Anaheim Ducks are picking, and they take Russian-born defenseman Pavel Mentnikov, playing in the OHL for Saginaw, who's a really gifted offensive defenseman here. Mentnikov should be able to make the jump to the NHL, probably not for 1 year, probably I'm thinking maybe 2 years out, but after the amount of defensemen they traded at the deadline, it's certainly not surprising at all that they would start to restock the process here. I know there's probably teams that were a few slots down that were hoping to get their hands on this defenseman who is a really gifted player, but he goes to Anaheim at number 10. Pick number 11 now belongs to the Arizona Coyotes by trade, and they select Winnipeg Ice centerman in the WHL, Connor Geekie. So in this selection here, the Coyotes traded picks 27, 34, and 45 to the San Jose Sharks, who originally owned this pick, in order to get the number 11 selection. So they get the big, strong centerman here from Manitoba. Certainly a nice addition. Of course, this is their second selection. They already took Logan Cooley, number 3 overalls, we just talked about. So that gives them a couple of really young, strong, exciting centers to build around down the middle here. Of course, Geekie's going to need some time before making the jump to the NHL here as well, like many of these prospects here in this draft. At 12 overall, we once again have the Columbus Blue Jackets selecting. They take another defenseman from the Western Hockey League, Moose Jaw Warriors, Denton Mateychuk. So, of course, they selected David Juraj earlier with their first-round pick, now Mateychuk. So they're really loading up on the back end. Mateychuk is a very gifted offensive defenseman. Some say it's a little bit of a high-risk, high-reward kind of player. Some others not quite to that level, but he's certainly a very gifted puck distributor. Can run a power play, has played really big minutes for Moose Jaw all year. Draws a little bit of a comparison to maybe like a Charlie McAvoy. Some say maybe a little more high-risk, high-reward like a Tony DeAngelo. I think a McAvoy comparison is probably a little bit more realistic. We don't know if he's going to be as good as Charlie McAvoy at this point. It's still early. He probably needs another year or two before making the jump, but Mateychuk is an excellent defensive pick here and a guy who projects to be a top 2 or 3 D-man in the NHL. 13th overall pick now belongs to the Chicago Blackhawks by trade, and they select U.S.-born player for the National Team Development Program, Frank Nazar. Now, of course, another young, exciting, dynamic forward here. Chicago now has a couple of picks with some tremendous upsides in this first round with Korchinski and Nazar here, of course. A little bit smaller player, going to be going to U.S. college hockey for a little while. Obviously, the Hawks are not planning on being competitive here for a few years, so these guys can take their time and really develop before making the jump to the NHL when they're ready. The 14th overall pick belongs to the Winnipeg Jets, and they, of course, just like the last pick, go back to the U.S. team. Rutger McGroarty, another captain here, a character player, great leadership, great hands, extremely smart player. The only question is a bit on his skating. I don't think it's as bad as some make it out to be. He's been working with skating coach Barb Underhill, trying to improve on things. He will be playing University of Michigan college hockey, so certainly going to take some time to develop. He's got the size already. Lots to like about this kid. Lots of upside. I'm sure the Jets are hoping he can become maybe something similar to like a Kyle Connor, for example, who came through the similar path, different kind of player, but the same kind of path to the NHL. So this could prove to be a great pick for the Jets. Certainly, many mock drafts had him going a little bit later, but obviously the Jets really are confident in him to be worthy of a pick this high. With the 15th overall selection, we have the Vancouver Canucks selecting Swedish player Jonathan Lekari-Mäki. He's a good-sized winger who protects the puck well. He's got a big release. Could be one of the best pure scorers out of this draft when it's all said and done years down the road. Now, of course, like fellow countryman Elias Pettersson, also the Canucks, certainly needs to get stronger. He's taller but lean, so he needs to add muscle for sure. Hopefully he doesn't lose that shooting ability as he does that. But otherwise, there's lots of like high skill, high motor, smart player. So he's likely going to need some time to probably remain in Sweden. He's already played at the pro level, the SHL. In a year or two's time, he could be a big part of the Canucks' future. At number 16, we have the Buffalo Sabres with their second first-round selection. This time they go to Sweden to select Noah Östlund. He's certainly a player with a lot of offensive upside, works very hard, smart hockey player. Obviously, he's looked upon as being a pretty good leader as well. Östlund's one of those players that you really wasn't sure where he was going to go in this draft. Many different scouting services had him ranked anywhere from the middle of the first round to late in the first round. A little bit of a polarizing pick in that sense, but certainly the Sabres have the time and patience here with this pick to let him develop. He will certainly need a little bit of time to get bigger and stronger and work on some things, but Östlund, a really solid pick here for Buffalo. 17th overall pick belongs to the Nashville Predators, and they select the first Finn in this draft, Joakim Kemell. Now, Kemell's a player who slid quite a bit here. He had many projected him in the top 10. I know there was a point earlier in the season where I know I had him in the top 10 for sure, if not in the top 5 to 7 selections. Certainly, he did have some injuries earlier this year that could have played a role in things, but certainly a guy who can be a gifted goal scorer. Looks like he's gotten a little bit bigger since the draft combine as well. Draws a little bit of a comparison to a David Pastrnak type of player. Obviously, we can't say with certainty he'll be a 40-goal guy like Pastrnak is, but Kemell has the same sort of quality. So we'll see if Nashville's found themselves a true elite potential goal scorer here. Number 18 selection belongs to the Dallas Stars, and they're taking Swiss-born defenseman Leon Bischel. He is an absolute monster, 6'5", 225 pounds. This guy is absolutely huge. He can play the physical game, but he can also play well with skilled players. So Dallas, once upon a time, had a really big guy back there, Jamie Alexiak. Kind of reminds me a little bit of him, except I think he has a little bit more upside with the offense. He can play more with skilled players, but this guy is not going to take too long to get to the NHL, in my opinion, given the fact he's got the size and strength and smarts already needed to be successful. For the next selection, we have the Minnesota Wild here at 19 overall, selecting from Sweden, Liam Öhgren. Liam Öhgren is a really solid player, great character, great leader, two-way, hard-skilled winger with speed, power, and a heavy shot. Something that the Minnesota Wild will certainly be able to benefit from here down the road, normally playing on the left wing. So I think he's a player that's likely, like most of these players, going to need some time to develop, but a really solid overall responsible player in all zones player for the Minnesota Wild. At 20th overall, we have the Washington Capitals, and they select the first Russian of the draft, Ivan Mironishenko. Now, of course, we know for a variety of reasons here, there's obviously the Russian factor played a role here in this player being available at the selection, but he also has gone through a lot of personal health issues this year, being struggling with a cancer diagnosis that he had to battle through, which he is fine here now. He's finally got a healthy, clear, clean slate, which is great to see. Obviously, that's a great pick, but, you know, he would have been likely a top 10 pick if he wouldn't have had to battle through that, and he would have been able to play a more normal season. So this very well could be a steal here for the Washington Capitals, who obviously have great intel in Russia. They have obviously a lot of success, including their current captain, Alex Ovechkin. Mironishenko could be a great pick for them. The 21st overall selection belonged to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and they selected defenseman Owen Pickering from the Swift Current Broncos of the Western Hockey League. The pick, of course, was announced by newly signed long-term Penguin Chris Letang. So quite an honor for him to welcome the new big defenseman into the Penguin organization. Of course, Pickering's got great size, 6'4", 180. Obviously bound to get a little bit stronger as he continues to mature and develop here, but a guy who can move the puck well, good in all zones, can really smart defender, and it really has a high projection here to be a top 4 D-man with size and skill for the Penguins. The 22nd overall pick belongs to the Anaheim Ducks, and they select Nathan Gaucher from the Quebec Ramparts. Big, strong centerman, 6'3", around 200 pounds. They had a former number 3 pick and top prospect Mason McTavish come up on stage to announce this pick. Gaucher is a player you can rely on in all situations, a really strong, big, strong guy. He's able to produce offense, but not somebody who's going to be a frontline player. I would say he probably projects to be a real solid third liner, to be honest. Maybe a second liner. Hard to say. He put up 57 points in 66 games for the Ramparts this year. He's a big, strong, reliable guy who will definitely be a player in the NHL, in my opinion. The 23rd overall pick belonged to the St. Louis Blues, and another U.S.-born player for the national team program, Jimmy Snuggerud, was selected here by the St. Louis Blues. Certainly somebody who is looked upon as being a greatly improved player over the past year. I think he has potential to be a real solid goal scorer, maybe even one of the better ones in this draft. Certainly a guy who can shoot, very gifted offensive player, pretty quick as well. I think the St. Louis Blues might have found themselves a real solid scorer here with this late first-round pick. Pick number 24 belongs to the Minnesota Wild, and they take Danila Yurov, the Russian player who by many are saying should be a top 10 pick, but of course, due to the Russian factor, has fallen in this draft as we had suspected. This guy is a really good player. The Minnesota Wild, like they had to do with Kirill Kaprizov, may have to wait some time to get him. It's difficult to say, but he's a very talented, offensively gifted player. A team like Minnesota with multiple first-round picks, I figured would be even the more likely teams to take a chance on a player like this. Pick number 25 belongs to the Chicago Blackhawks via trade here. They've selected defenseman Sam Rinzel, who's a bit of a project defenseman. He's 6'4", 180 pounds, so he certainly has some size. He's going to be taking a while, probably a good 3 years before he's really going to have a shot at the NHL. But he has a size. There is some potential there, but certainly a little bit of an off-the-board selection with this one. Number 26 selection belongs to the Montreal Canadiens, and they've taken Slovakian forward Filip Mesar. There was some wondering if they might select Ken Hughes' son Jack with this selection, but they've chosen to go with Mesar, who's a terrific hockey player. Another Slovakian, of course, fellow countryman to their first overall selection in Juraj Slafkovsky. Mesar is a smaller, skilled player. Slafkovsky himself, actually, while interviewed during the draft, described him as being a potential beast, high-scoring player down the road, but he described himself as a smaller, skilled player, so he certainly would be a good complementary piece to play in the middle six for the Habs down the road for sure. So another great selection here by Montreal. The next selection belongs to the San Jose Sharks, and they take Philip Bystead, who is certainly, you could say, is a little bit of an off-the-board selection. He's 6'4", 205 pounds, a centerman from Sweden. Was certainly projected to be a lower pick. Many feel this is a bit of a project pick. Might be a middle six center at best. Doesn't really do anything at an elite level. For the most part, the most scouts think he's good and average, but that's why a lot of people thought he would go much later in the draft. So we'll see if this pays off for San Jose. Pick number 28 belongs to the Buffalo Sabres here yet again. They now select Jiri Kilic from the Czech Republic. They get themselves another centerman. Obviously, they have a pattern here. The Sabres have a lot of defensemen. They had some good wingers. Now they're stocking up on centerman, and it continues here. The left shot center, 6 feet tall, 180 pounds, from Sweden, as I mentioned. He's a very speedy player, really good along the boards, good passer, really smart, hardworking player. Should project to be a decent NHLer. I don't think he's going to be an elite level player, but it could be a potential player for the middle six. Pick number 29 now belongs to the Arizona Coyotes after trading with the Edmonton Oilers, and they select Maverick Lamoureux from the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League in Drummondville Voltigeurs. Now, he is a bit of a project defenseman, but the guy is absolutely a monster. 6'7", just shy of 200 pounds. He's going to obviously need to add a little bit of some muscle to that big frame of his. Like I said, a little bit of a project guy, but he's certainly a well-rounded athlete in that sense, especially given the size he has. He put up 24 points in 54 games last year in the Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. Pick 30 belongs to the Winnipeg Jets by way of trade, and they select Brad Lambert. Of course, Lambert once upon a time was in the conversation for being a top 1 or 2 selection, but of course has fallen down drastically here and fallen even further than many thought in this first round. Of course, he's both Canadian and Finnish, having a parent from each country. Certainly has potential to be a really smart, play-driving middle six player, but there obviously has been some concerns over his consistency. So he's likely going to make the jump to North America. I would think he could play in the WHL next year for Seattle. Obviously, looks like they're going to have a real solid team there. Might be a good place for him to go and start having fun again and kind of change things up. It seems like playing in Finland hasn't worked out the best for him in this past year, but certainly a good opportunity for a team like Winnipeg to give him a chance. With pick 31, we have the Tampa Bay Lightning, and yet another player from the U.S. national team, Isaac Howard. This guy is another offensive dynamo, not overly huge, 5'10", 180 pounds, but he's going to be going to a great organization who can help him develop here. Has real potential to develop into, likely, I would say, a middle six scoring winger type of role for the Lightning. With the final pick in the first round, number 32 belongs to the Edmonton Oilers via trade, and they select Reed Schaefer from the Seattle Thunderbirds. He's another big, strong, power forward type of player, 6'3" with 214 pounds. Certainly was a big riser, a greatly improved player this year. Wasn't expecting a lot. It was likely going to be a mid-round pick at best, and he's really skyrocketed up here with some tremendous improvements here on the play. Certainly projects, like I said, to be a big, strong, potential power forward type of player here in the NHL. So the Oilers have themselves probably a little bit of a project, but he's going to be playing on a really strong, deep Thunderbirds team here in the WHL for the next few years as he continues his development. So that's the full recap here of the full 32 selections in the first round of the 2022 NHL Draft. Let me know your thoughts on the players that were selected by these teams. Of course, we had lots of other news here today, lots of other rumors, some trades, signings, etc. There is several other dedicated videos on the channel here talking about a lot of those other items that have already transpired here today, looking at all the trades and everything else that's gone down. So certainly check those out if you haven't here already, and we'll certainly be coming back tomorrow with more coverage for rounds 2 through 7 for the 2022 NHL Draft. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. Of course, we'll keep you up to date with all the draft coverage you need, as well as free agency and everything throughout the entire offseason, getting ready for next season. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.